My name is Matthew Collin. I'm a hematologist in Newcastle, and I'm talking to you today about the UK Histiocytosis Registry, which is funded by Histio UK. So the idea of a registry has been around for a couple of years. It's taken a little while to set this up because of a lot of regulatory framework that has to be completed. But we now have a nationwide registry that's open and is recruiting patients. So I'll tell you a little bit about the functions of a registry and what we hope to do with it. As part of the registry, we're also a recognized tissue bank. So that means we can not only collect information about patients, but we can also access material that's been stored in pathology labs around the country for the purpose of doing research on tissue samples. But the primary goals, I think, relate to the patient journey and what happens to people with histiocytosis. I'll say a bit more about this in a second. The first thing maybe to say is that histiocytosis covers a couple of different disease entities. So there are diseases related to Langerhans cell histiocytosis. That includes also Erdheim-Chester disease and Rosai-Dorfman disease. And these are a bunch of histiocytosis that are related to mild forms of cancer. So that's one group of patients that we hope to recruit. Another very pressing clinical need is to recruit patients with hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis, or HLH for short. And that's a slightly different kind of disease. It's not related to cancer in any way at all, but it's related to overactivation of the immune system and so-called hyperinflammation. And as many of you know, this can cause very serious illness and is often sadly fatal. So we really need to make progress in this area. But both types of histiocytosis are being recruited by the registry. And really the things that we hope to accomplish can be put under two headings. I think the first is to raise awareness and to improve healthcare services for patients. So particular groups need help with this. One group that I'm interested in and advocate for are adults with LCH type histiocytosis, because within the NHS there's really not a recognized commissioning pathway. That means a provision of healthcare services for this group of patients. And the first thing we need to do is to be able to say to NHS England and the wider British Isles, this is the number of patients that have these disorders, and these are the kind of problems they have. And most importantly, these are the drugs that we need access to. So if you're or a relative have got one of the Langerhans cell type histiocytosis, you'll be aware that there are some very good modern drugs, so-called inhibitors, that can be used to treat these diseases, but these drugs are not routinely available on the NHS. And one of the things we need to strive for in the next few years is to get good, equitable access to these medications. Another thing that's very important is to hear from our patients themselves as to their experience of the disease. So there's a way that this is collected. It's simply called patient-reported outcomes. But in order to gather that information, we need to be able to register people so we can go back to them, hopefully with an electronic form, to capture their experience of their disease. And patient-reported outcomes, people are now realizing that this is really what we need to pay attention to when we're thinking of designing services for patients, because the patients are the ones with the disease, so we need to listen to them. And then a little further ahead, I think we'll be able to go and do research in the genomic field. That means sequencing the DNA of patients with histiocytosis. And this particularly applies actually to the group of HLH patients, where quite often this is a devastating and unexpected illness, and we don't really understand why this happens. So it's hard to give an explanation to patients and their families as to why somebody has suddenly become so terribly sick. But we think the answers will lie in the genes. So collecting a larger group of patients where we can have access to, say, a blood sample and certainly any biopsies that have been stored, this may give us answers to the nature of these devastating conditions and ultimately lead to new treatments. So those are the reasons for doing a registry. We're very grateful to support from Histio UK, helping us to create a nice new website. It's at ukhr.org, where all the information will be held, including the documentation that's required. So patient information sheets and consent forms will be downloadable from this site. At the moment, we are allowed to consent you for participation remotely over the telephone and by post or email, but we're also working on producing an electronic form of the consent form, so you can do this on your smartphone or tablet or computer, just to make recruitment a lot easier. It's quite a laborious process, and you know, recruitment and addition to the registry is a bit slow, but we are getting there, and we hope to have, say, 100 patients recruited by the end of this year and 200 or more by the end of next year, 2022. And we'll be giving you regular updates on the progress of this. And of course, any research and developments that come from participants who've joined the registry. So thank you for listening to this, and take care. Bye-bye.